Hello, I'm Misha, Adobe creator and producer of the Deep Dive podcast. Welcome to Season 3, Episode 26, and today we will be doing a deep dive into the Switch 2 versus the Steam Deck. Okay, it looks like Grace and David have their snacks ready and are settled in behind the microphones, so let's get going.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, and this Deep Dive is produced by Misha who's an Adobe creator. I'm your host.
And I'm your expert for today.
You're joining us for Season 3, Episode 26. And today, we're tackling something lots of gamers are thinking about.
Oh, yeah. What's the big topic?
Well, Olivia from Lincoln City, Oregon, actually requested this one. It's the big Showdown, the upcoming Nintendo Switch 2 versus the current king of handheld PCs, the Steam Deck.
Yes. The clash of the titans in portable gaming. It's a really interesting comparison. Different philosophies entirely.
Totally. Nintendo and Valve, they're both huge players, but they come at handhelds from, well, different angles.
Absolutely. And understanding what the Switch 2 might bring versus what the Steam Deck already offers is pretty crucial if you're thinking about upgrading or jumping in.
Okay, let's kick things off with the Switch 2. The buzz is definitely building. That rumored worldwide launch date, June 5th, 2025, keeps popping up everywhere.
It does seem to be the date everyone's coalescing around. Yeah, June 5th. But it's worth noting that little bit of turbulence for the U.S. pre-orders.
Right, the delay they announced back in April. Something about tariffs.
Exactly. April 4th, tariffs and market conditions were cited. It suggests Nintendo's navigating some specific U.S. challenges.
And then the pre-orders opened kind of staggered, right? April 24th, May 8th for some places.
Yeah, it feels like a very controlled rollout, maybe managing supplier demand carefully for the U.S. launch.
Well, they've got big shoes to fill. The original Switch, over 150 million sold since 2017. That's staggering.
It's a phenomenon. And the big talk for the successor is, of course, the power upgrade, that custom NVIDIA processor.
NVIDIA is apparently claiming a 10-fold graphics boost over the original. That sounds huge.
It is. If that pans out, we could be looking at something close to, say, PlayStation 4 level visuals in a handheld. That's a massive jump.
Wow.
And this new chip isn't just raw power. It's supposedly got dedicated RT cores.
For ray tracing, so like much better lighting and reflection.
Precisely. More realistic environments, and also tensor cores. Those are key for AI stuff.
Which brings us to DLSS, Deep Learning Super Sampling. Can you break that down? Why is that such a big deal for a handheld?
Okay, so think of DLSS like this. It's smart upscaling. The Switch 2 renders the game at a lower resolution, which is easier on the hardware, right? Then the AI, using those tensor cores, intelligently scales it up to a higher resolution, potentially 4K, when docked, trying to keep the image looking sharp.
So you get better performance, smoother frame rates, without a massive hit to how it looks.
That's the goal. It means potentially hitting 4K at maybe 60 frames per second on your TV.
Which is impressive for handheld core.
Definitely. And even in handheld mode, it could mean sharper 1080p visuals, maybe even pushing 120 frames per second at 1080p or 1440p. It lets developers aim higher, graphically.
Okay, that really does sound like a game changer. What about the rest of the internals, like RAM and the screen?
Yeah, the speculation points towards either 8 or maybe 12 gigabytes of LPDDR5 RAM. That's fast, efficient memory, good for modern games.
And the screen itself, bigger, I heard.
Seems like it.
Trade in your boring job for a brilliant career using Adobe Creative Cloud. Start learning now with the free trial link in the description.
Rumor is a 7.9-inch LCD, so bigger than the original and the OLED Switch. And it's expected to be 1080p resolution.
1080p handheld, nice.
And potentially up to 120 Hz refresh rate. Plus HDR support for better colors and contrast, and VRR variable refresh rate for smoother motion.
Interesting they're going with LCD, though, not OLED, like the, Switch OLED model. Any idea why?
Likely a balance, cost versus features versus battery. OLED looks amazing, great contrast, but it could be pricier and sometimes use more power. So maybe Nintendo's aiming for that sweet spot, keep the price reasonable, deliver good battery life, but still offer a big visual upgrade with 1080p, HDR, and VRR on an LCD.
Makes sense. Speaking of battery life, what are the whispers there? Is that getting a boost too?
The estimates are actually pretty similar to the original Switch at launch, maybe somewhere between 2 and, say, 6.5 hours, depending on the game.
Huh. Even with a bigger battery, I heard it's got a larger capacity.
Yeah, reportedly a 500 and 220 milliamp battery, up from 4,310 milliamp in the original, but that new processor in screen, they're probably going to be thirstier.
Okay, so more power capacity, but also more power draw. Kind of cancels out.
Seems likely, yeah. Similar actual use time. potentially.
And storage. The original 32 gigs felt tiny almost immediately.
Oh, definitely. Good news there, the Switch 2 is expected to jump to 256 GB internally. That's a much better starting point.
Way better. And expansion. Still micro SD.
Yes, but potentially with a twist. It's reported to have a microSD Express slot.
Express. What's that mean?
Faster speeds. But the potential curveball is that some reports suggest standard, older microSD cards might not work.
Really? So you might need to buy new, faster cards.
Possibly. It would make sense if they want faster loading times to match the new processor, but it could be an extra cost for users. Something to watch.
Okay, lots of interesting potential there for the Switch 2. Let's pivot now to the Steam Deck, the established player. What's under its hood?
So the Steam Deck uses a custom AMD chip, an APU, that combines the CPU and GPU.
Oh, the AMD's approach.
It's got a Zen 2 CPU, 4 cores, 8 threads, running between 2.4 and 3.5 gigahertz. The graphics side is RDNA 2, 8 compute units. Clock speed varies slightly between the LCD and OLED models, up to 1.6 gigahertz.
Your RAM.
A solid 16 gigs of LPDDR5 RAM across all models. The OLED version has slightly faster RAM, 6400 MTs versus 5500 on the LCD.
And you can tweak the power usage, right?
Yeah, the APU power can range from 4 to 15 watts, lets you balance performance and battery life depending on the game. It's quite flexible.
And unlike the Switch 2 rumors, the Steam Deck actually has different screen options available right now.
Exactly. You've got the original 7-inch LCD. It's an IPS panel, 1280 by 800 resolution, 60 hertz refresh rate. Good screen.
But then there's the OLED.
Right, the newer model.
Right.
Slightly larger at 7.4 inches, same 1280 by 800 resolution, but it's HDR OLED. Big difference in contrast and color vibrancy.
And faster refresh.
Yep, up to 90 hertz on the OLED. And it gets way brighter, especially for HDR content, up to 1000 nits, peak brightness. It's a gorgeous display.
Battery life tends to be a hot topic for these things. How does the deck stack up?
It varies a lot, as you'd expect. The LCD model has a 40 watt-hour battery. You'll probably get somewhere between 2 and 8 hours.
Okay, and the OLED?
That's one of its main advantages.
Yeah.
It has a bigger 50 watt-hour battery, plus the OLED screen is generally more efficient. So Valve claims, and users often see, anywhere from 3 to maybe 12 hours.
Wow, up to 12. That's a significant jump, potentially.
It really depends on the game and settings, of course. Running a really demanding AAA title will drain it much faster than an indie game. But yeah, the OLED generally lasts longer.
And storage options, Valve gives you choices there too.
They do. The LCD models used to have a 64 GB eMMC option, but now it starts at 256 GB NVMe SSD, and there's a 512 GB NVMe SSD too.
NVMe was much faster than eMMC, right?
Yeah, significantly faster load times. The OLED models come with either 512 GB or a full 1 TB NVMe SSD.
And you can add more storage easily.
Yep, all models have a high-speed UHSI microSD card slot, so
Yeah.
expansion is straightforward.
Can you upgrade the internal drive?
Technically, yes,
Yeah.
people do it. But Valve warns that opening it up and swapping the internal SSD could void your warranty, so something to be aware of.
Right, proceed with caution there. Okay, let's talk about the lifeblood, the games. This feels like a huge differentiator.
It absolutely is. This is where their core philosophies really diverge. Nintendo Switch 2, it's all about those first-party exclusives.
Mario, Zelda, Pokemon, the system sellers?
Exactly. We already know Mario Kart World is slated as a launch title. An open-world Mario Kart. That sounds intriguing.
Definitely curious about that one.
And you can bet we'll see enhanced versions of existing Switch hits, running better, looking sharper. Plus, brand new exclusives built just for the Switch 2's power.
And third parties. Will they get better versions too?
That's the expectation. With the extra power and potentially DLSS, developers might be more willing or able to bring more demanding multi-platform games to the Switch 2 and have them run well.
Trade in your boring job for a brilliant career using Adobe Creative Cloud. Start learning now with the free trial link in the description.
Okay, so strong first-party, enhanced existing games, and potentially better third-party support. Now, the Steam Deck.
The Steam Deck's strength is just sheer volume and variety. It's basically a handheld PC.
So your Steam library comes with you?
Pretty much. Anything in your Steam library that's compatible, you can install and play. But it goes beyond that.
How so?
Because it runs Linux with a desktop mode, you can install other launchers. Epic Games Store, GOG, itch.io. You can access games from those stores too.
Whoa, okay, so it's not just locked to Steam.
Not at all. And then there's emulation. The Deck is a fantastic emulation device. Retro consoles, even some more modern ones, the possibilities are huge.
So library size. Steam Deck wins by a mile, just in terms of raw numbers and diversity.
Undeniably.
Yeah.
If access to the widest possible range of games, especially PC games and emulation, is your priority, The Steam Deck has a massive advantage right now.
Let's talk about actually using these things. The interface, the operating system. Nintendo's usually known for being simple, right?
Incredibly so.
Yeah.
User-friendliness is their trademark. We can expect the Switch 2's OS to be an evolution of the current Switch interface, clean, intuitive, controller-focused, easy for anyone to pick up.
Very console-like.
Exactly. Streamlined for gaming and accessibility.
And the Steam Deck, it runs SteamOS. What's that like?
SteamOS 3 is Linux-based, specifically Arch Linux, but Valve has heavily customized it for handheld gaming. It actually has 2 modes.
2 modes.
Yeah. There's game mode, which looks and feels like a console interface, big pictures, easy to navigate with a controller, launch your Steam games, very smooth.
Okay. And the other mode?
That's desktop mode. Switch to that, and you basically have a full Linux desktop. You can open a web browser, install applications, manage files. It's like a portable computer.
So much more flexible, but maybe a bit more complex if you're not used to PCs.
Potentially, yeah. Especially desktop mode. SteamOS also has that useful compatibility rating system for games verified, playable, and supported, which helps manage expectations with the huge PC library.
Right, because not every PC game is going to work perfectly out of the box.
Precisely. So SteamOS offers amazing flexibility, but might have a slightly steeper learning curve for pure console users compared to Nintendo's likely approach.
Okay, let's talk money. What are these things going to cost? What's the current Steam Deck pricing?
Right now, the baseline Steam Deck, the 256 GB LCD model, is $399.
And the OLEDs?
The 512 GB OLED is $549, and the top-end 1 TB OLED is $649. So a bit of a range there.
Okay. And the Switch 2, what's the announced price?
Nintendo announced $450 for the console itself, and there's a bundle with a digital copy of Mario Kart World for $500.
So $450 base, that puts it right between the LCD deck and the 512 GB OLED deck.
Exactly. It's positioned quite competitively in that mid-range. Remember that U.S. pre-order delay? There was some worry tariffs might push the price up.
Wow, right.
But Nintendo held the line on the console price for pre-orders, though they did apparently adjust pricing on some accessories slightly upwards.
Interesting. Okay, so price-wise, they're definitely in the same ballpark, depending on the specific model you choose.
For sure.
How about actually carrying these things around and holding them? Portability, ergonomics, big difference there.
Looks like it, yeah. Based on reported specs, the Switch 2 is aiming to be quite a bit thinner and lighter. Dimensions are supposedly around 166 by 272 millimeters and only 13.9 millimeters thick, weight around 401 grams.
401 grams. Okay, how does that compare to the deck?
The Steam Deck OLED is chunkier. It's about 298 millimeters wide, 117 millimeters tall, and 49 millimeters thick. And it weighs 640 grams. The LCD is even a tad heavier at 669 grams.
Whoa, okay, so the Switch 2 is potentially over 200 grams lighter. That's noticeable.
Definitely. That thinner, lighter profile could make the Switch 2 feel significantly more portable, easier to just chuck in a bag or hold for long periods.
But the Steam Deck is designed with those big grips, right? People say it's comfortable despite the weight.
Absolutely. It's larger, heavier, but those sculpted grips are designed for comfortable, extended play. And it has those integrated trackpads, which are fantastic for controlling PC games that rely on a mouse.
Right, controls are key. And the Switch 2 has new Joy-Cons.
Yeah, Joy-Con 2s. They apparently attach magnetically now, which is neat. Reports say they're larger than the originals, potentially more ergonomic.
That would be welcome. The original Joy-Cons could feel a bit small for some people.
For sure. So potentially improved ergonomics on the Switch 2 as well, just in a different form factor.
Any other unique bells and whistles rumored for the Switch 2 or its accessories?
Well, the new dock is expected to be pretty capable, supporting that 4K output at 60 FPS, plus HDR.
Nice for TV play.
And it reportedly has a built-in fan, maybe for better cooling when pushing those higher resolutions, and 2 USB-C ports.
Okay. And the Joy-Con 2s themselves. Anything special besides being bigger and magnetic?
Some interesting rumors there. One is the ability to use them as a sort of mouse pointer in some situations.
Like a Wii remote?
Kind of, potentially.
Yeah.
Also, a dedicated C button, maybe for game chat or custom functions, and just generally larger, smoother analog sticks and buttons, plus a redesigned wrist strap.
That mouse function could be interesting for certain game genres on a console.
It could open up some possibilities, yeah.
Okay, let's try and pull this all together. Strengths and weaknesses, based on what we know and what's rumored. Switch 2 first.
Okay, Switch 2 strengths. Definitely those killer first-party Nintendo games. The potential for a really smooth, easy-to-use interface. It's likely lighter, thinner design, making it super portable. And that improved 4K docked output is a big plus for TV gamers.
And weaknesses.
The battery life seems like it might not be a huge leap forward, potentially similar to the original launch Switch. Using an LCD screen, while maybe good for cost, isn't as premium as the deck's OLED option. And while the library will have exclusives, the overall size of the library will almost certainly be smaller than the Steam Deck's PC access.
Got it. Now the Steam Deck. Strengths.
Unbeatable game library, access your Steam games, other PC stores, emulation. It's incredibly versatile. The operating system's open, customizable, potentially much longer battery life, especially with the OLED model. And those trackpads are genuinely useful for PC games.
Weaknesses.
It's bigger and heavier, no getting around that. Less portable than the Switch 2 likely will be. The user experience, especially outside of game mode, can be a bit more fiddly for non-PC folks. And that warranty concern if you decide to upgrade the internal SSD yourself.
So it really boils down to what kind of gamer you are and what you value most.
Exactly. There's no single winner. It's about the right fit.
Who's the ideal Switch 2 owner then?
Probably someone who lives for Nintendo games, Mario, Zelda, the next big exclusive. Someone who wants a seamless, simple, console-first experience, both handheld and docked. Portability is likely high on their list, and they appreciate that easy transition to 4K on the TV.
Okay. And the ideal Steam Deck owner.
That's likely an existing PC gamer who wants to take their library on the road. Someone who loves tinkering, values the flexibility of an open OS, wants access to different stores, maybe enjoys emulation. Longer battery life on the OLED might be a big draw, and they see the value in the trackpads for controlling certain games.
This has been super helpful. It really lays out the different paths these two devices are taking in the handheld space. It's an exciting time for portable gaming.
It really is. You've got the Switch 2 promising a big performance jump in those beloved Nintendo exclusives in a refined package.
And the Steam Deck championing open PC gaming, giving you access to almost everything with lots of customization.
So, for you listening, the choice really depends on your priorities. How important are those Nintendo exclusives versus a vast PC library? What about graphical power versus battery life, portability versus control options, and of course the price?
Lots to weigh up.
Absolutely.
We'll see you next time.
See you later.
And that's a wrap on this deep dive. I'm Misha, and let me send out a huge thank you for listening. If you want more content on gaming, education, or other fun stuff, head over and find me on YouTube. Link is in the show notes. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch you on the next deep dive.